What if the stories we've passed down for centuries weren't just myths, but were actually faded memories of a reality far more incredible than we've ever dared to believe? Picture a civilization not bound by the same laws of nature that govern our world, a society so advanced it had unlocked the secrets of time itself. This isn't the plot of a science fiction novel. It's the tantalizing mystery at the heart of one of history's greatest legends, the lost city of Atlantis. For thousands of years, we've been captivated by Plato's account of this magnificent island empire, a place of unparalleled engineering and wisdom that vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night. But what if the most astonishing part of the story has been hiding in plain sight all along? We're not just talking about magnificent architecture or powerful energy sources. We are talking about something that defies our fundamental understanding of physics. We are talking about the most incredible and perhaps most forbidden technology Atlantis ever possessed, a power source built upon the principles of time crystals. The very idea sounds like something from the distant future, a concept so advanced that modern physicists are only just beginning to understand its potential. A time crystal is a theoretical structure, a system that exists in a state of perpetual motion, not by consuming energy, but by breaking the natural symmetry of time. In simpler terms, it's an object that can oscillate or move in a repeating pattern without ever winding down, forever out of sync with the world around it. It's a concept that challenges everything we know about entropy and the inevitable march towards disorder. Now, imagine an entire civilization that had not only theorized about such a phenomenon but had actually harnessed it. What could a society achieve with such a power source? They could build structures that seemed to repair themselves, create energy systems that never depleted, and perhaps even develop ways to perceive or interact with time in a way we can scarcely comprehend. This was not mere magic. It was a technology so profound, so dangerously powerful, that it might have been the very reason Atlantis had to be lost to the world. This journey we're about to take together is not just an exploration of an ancient myth. It is a dive into a mystery that sits at the crossroads of legend and cutting-edge science. We are going to piece together clues from ancient texts, align them with mind-bending modern physics, and follow a trail that suggests the story of Atlantis is far more than a cautionary tale. It is a warning and a promise about a level of technological achievement that humanity once touched and may have been deemed too dangerous to keep. So join me as we pull back the veil on this forgotten chapter of human history. We will explore what these time crystals might have been, how they could have powered a golden age, and ask the chilling question: did the Atlanteans play with forces so fundamental to reality that their civilization paid the ultimate price? The answers are more extraordinary than you can possibly imagine. To truly grasp the potential of this lost technology, we must first return to the very beginning, to the words that started it all. Our entire understanding of Atlantis rests on the work of one man, the Greek philosopher Plato. In two of his famous dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 years before the Common Era, Plato provides the only detailed, first-hand account of the island empire. He doesn't present it as a fable, but as a true historical event, a story passed down through generations from an Athenian lawgiver named Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais. These priests claimed that Atlantis was a mighty power that existed 9,000 years before their own time, placing its peak around 11,500 years ago from our present day. Plato's description is astonishingly precise. He describes Atlantis as an island larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined, situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. This places it squarely in the Atlantic Ocean. At its heart was a magnificent capital city, built on a series of concentric rings of land and water. The city was a marvel of engineering, with massive walls plated in precious metals, brass, tin, and the mysterious orichalcum, a metal said to glow with a fiery light. The central Acropolis housed a grand temple to the god Poseidon, and the entire civilization was powered by a mysterious earth-born energy source that provided warmth and light. The society was governed by a wise and just confederation of kings, and its people had achieved a golden age of knowledge and peace. But then, as Plato chillingly writes, the Atlanteans' divine nature became diluted with their human nature. They grew arrogant, aggressive, and sought to conquer the entire Mediterranean. It was at this point that the gods intervened. In a single day and night of catastrophic earthquakes and floods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea and vanished forever. Now, this foundational account is compelling on its own, but the plot thickens when we look beyond Plato. While his dialogues are the most complete, whispers of a great antediluvian or pre-flood civilization appear in the myths and histories of cultures across the globe. The ancient Egyptians spoke of a primordial island known as the Field of Reeds, a paradisiacal land of advanced beings. The Aztecs had their legend of Aztlan, a mythical homeland to the north. Even the Hopi Native Americans tell of a previous world that was destroyed by water due to the corruption of its people. These parallel narratives are too consistent to be easily dismissed as mere coincidence. They form a collective memory of a cataclysm that wiped out a sophisticated culture. This broader tapestry of legend is what fuels modern speculation. If we take Plato at his word, even partially, we are not just looking for a sunken city with pretty buildings. We are searching for the remnants of a society that had achieved a technological zenith that rivaled, or perhaps even surpassed, our own. The description of a self-sustaining energy source, the intricate hydraulic engineering of the concentric canals, and the mention of a glowing, unknown metal like orichalcum, these are not the details of a simple Bronze Age culture. They are the hallmarks of an advanced civilization. When you combine Plato's specific technological hints with the universal human memory of a great flood that reset civilization, the stage is set for a radical reinterpretation of history. The legend is no longer just about a lost city. It becomes a potential blueprint for a lost science, a science that may have been built upon principles we are only now beginning to rediscover. To appreciate how such an idea could connect to an ancient legend, we first need to understand what a time crystal actually is in the modern scientific sense. It's a concept that feels like it should belong in fantasy, yet it represents one of the most fascinating frontiers in physics today. At its core, a time crystal is a new phase of matter. We're all familiar with the standard phases: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. Each of these describes how atoms are arranged in space. A time crystal adds a breathtaking new dimension to this by defining a pattern in time. Imagine a perfectly arranged crystal like a diamond where atoms are locked into a repeating lattice structure. Now picture that crystal not just being still but ticking like a clock. Its atoms don't just sit in a grid, they oscillate, rotate, or change state in a perfect, unending cycle. The truly revolutionary and seemingly impossible part of this is what powers that cycle: nothing. A grandfather clock needs to be wound. A battery-powered device drains its charge. Every system we know obeys the law of thermodynamics that says everything tends toward disorder, a state called entropy. Energy spreads out and is lost to friction and heat. A time crystal defies this fundamental rule. It achieves what's known as a ground state, its lowest possible energy level, but instead of being still and inert, it remains in perpetual motion. It's like pushing a child on a swing just once and having them swing back and forth forever without you ever pushing again, completely frictionless. This is possible because the time crystal exists in a stable, repeating pattern that is out of sync with its environment. It breaks what physicists call time translation symmetry, meaning the laws of physics that govern it don't look the same at every moment in time from the crystal's perspective. It has its own inherent rhythm that persists without any energy input. The concept was first proposed by Nobel laureate Frank Wilczek in 2012, and for years it was met with intense skepticism. Many physicists argued it was fundamentally impossible, a violation of the very laws that underpin our universe. But then, in 2017, separate teams at Harvard University and the University of Maryland did the unthinkable. They created time crystals in the laboratory. They didn't use magic or mythical metals. They used complex systems like chains of charged atoms called ions or dense impurities in diamonds. By carefully manipulating these systems with lasers, they nudged them into this bizarre new phase of matter, where they indeed began to oscillate at a frequency different from the laser that started the motion. They had created a new state of being, one that ticks with a rhythm all its own. So why is this idea so world-shattering? It's not because we're going to build perpetual motion machines to power our homes. The energy can't be tapped from a time crystal without disrupting its delicate state. The real revolution lies in what it teaches us about the nature of reality and its potential applications. For quantum computing, time crystals could offer an incredibly stable foundation for storing and processing information, protecting fragile quantum states from the decoherence that currently plagues the technology. They open a window into studying exotic phases of matter and could radically advance our understanding of thermodynamics itself. This isn't just a new gadget, it's a fundamental shift in our comprehension of physics, proving that the universe allows for forms of organization and motion we previously thought were forbidden. It reveals a layer of reality where the arrow of time can, in a very specific and controlled way, be made to loop back on itself. Given that modern science has only just proven the existence of such a bizarre state of matter, the notion that an ancient civilization could have understood it seems, on the surface, utterly preposterous. But this is where we must shift our perspective. What if the Atlanteans didn't understand the physics in the same complex mathematical language we use today? What if they instead discovered its effects through observation and experimentation, and then described it using the only vocabulary they had, the language of myth, magic, and divinity? This idea that ancient stories might be metaphorical containers for advanced knowledge isn't as far-fetched as it seems. We see potential examples scattered throughout history. Take the so-called Baghdad battery, a clay jar from 2,000 years ago containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod. When filled with an acidic substance like vinegar, it produces a small electrical charge. Was it a primitive battery or merely a storage vessel for sacred scrolls? The debate rages, but its very existence hints that ancient peoples might have been tinkering with forces we consider modern. Then there's Greek fire, the legendary incendiary weapon used by the Byzantine Empire. Historical accounts describe a liquid flame that could not be extinguished with water, even burning on its surface. Its exact composition remains a mystery lost to time, but its effect was a terrifying technological advantage in naval warfare. These are not just curiosities, they are evidence that advanced applied science, even if its underlying principles weren't fully articulated, existed in the ancient world. If something as potent as Greek fire could be developed and then lost, what prevents us from considering that an even more advanced civilization, millennia earlier, could have stumbled upon principles that we are only now validating with particle accelerators and quantum computers? This brings us back to Plato's description of Atlantis with fresh eyes. He speaks of a mysterious power source that provided warmth and light to the entire island, a force that was Earth-born. We typically interpret this as geothermal energy, but what if it was something else? What if the glowing metal orichalcum wasn't just a decorative alloy, but a key component in a larger system? Imagine a massive, naturally occurring or artificially engineered time crystal structure deep beneath the Atlantean capital. This crystal, in its perpetual, stable oscillation, could have acted as a perfectly regulated energy regulator or a quantum stabilizer. It might not have produced energy directly, but rather, it could have helped to harness or focus other ambient energy sources with near-perfect efficiency, creating a society that appeared to have limitless power. The concentric rings of water and land in the city's design might not have been just for defense or aesthetics. They could have been part of a resonant cavity, a gigantic architectural system designed to interact with and amplify the effects of this central crystalline heart. In this light, the myth of Atlantis transforms. The story of Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes, bestowing this technology upon his mortal children, could be a mythological encoding of the discovery of a fundamental natural force. The eventual corruption and downfall of the Atlanteans might then be a warning about the catastrophic consequences of misusing such a profoundly interconnected technology. If their power system was based on manipulating the very fabric of time and stability on a local scale, a critical failure wouldn't be like a nuclear meltdown. It could be something infinitely stranger and more devastating. A disruption in such a system might not just release energy, it could create a localized temporal spatial anomaly, a violent rupture in reality itself that could literally unravel the island from the map, causing it to be swallowed by the sea in a cataclysm that was as much a fracture in time as it was a physical flood. The legends of a single day and night of destruction take on a new, terrifying plausibility when you consider the potential of a technology that fails while playing with the rules of time. This brings us to the heart of the matter, the core hypothesis that transforms the legend of Atlantis from a simple story into a profound technological mystery. What if the Atlanteans' golden age, their incredible power and prosperity, was not powered by magic or gods, but by a practical, working understanding of time crystal physics? Imagine them not as sorcerers, but as engineers of reality itself, having discovered a way to tap into a fundamental rhythm of the universe. This idea proposes that the civilization's legendary energy source, the force that warmed their cities and lit their halls without fire or fuel, was a massive, engineered system built around the principles of these perpetual motion crystals. Consider how such a system might have functioned. We can envision a central power core, perhaps located deep beneath the grand temple of Poseidon, harnessing a natural or synthetically grown time crystal structure. This wouldn't be a battery in the conventional sense, storing a finite amount of energy. Instead, it would act as a perfect regulator or a catalyst. In its ground state of perpetual, stable oscillation, the time crystal could have served to focus and amplify other ambient energy sources with near 100% efficiency. Think of geothermal heat from the Earth's core, or the kinetic energy of the ocean waves crashing against the island's shores. Normally, harnessing such energy is messy and inefficient, with much of the power lost as waste heat. But a time crystal-based system could theoretically synchronize with these energies, creating a resonant feedback loop that draws power in and distributes it cleanly and endlessly. The entire city, with its concentric rings of water and land, may have been designed as a gigantic resonator, an architectural circuit board that worked in harmony with this central crystalline heart to create a stable, self-sustaining energy field across the entire island. This would explain the descriptions of Atlantis as a land of unparalleled abundance and technological marvel. Buildings that seem to repair themselves could be the result of materials stabilized at a quantum level by the pervasive energy field. The legendary metal orichalcum, which glowed with its own inner fire, might have been an alloy whose atomic structure was permanently altered or excited by its proximity to the time crystal core, giving it unique luminous and perhaps even superconducting properties. Their society wouldn't have needed to mine for coal or cut down forests for fuel. Their power was clean, limitless, and woven directly into the fabric of their environment. This technological mastery would have freed them to pursue incredible advances in art, science, and architecture, creating the paradise that Plato described. But such power does not come without inherent risks, and this is where the myth carries its most potent warning. a system that operates by bending the local rules of time and stability, is incredibly delicate. It exists in a precarious balance. If the Atlanteans, in their growing arrogance, attempted to scale this technology beyond its safe limits, perhaps to power weapons of conquest as Plato suggests, or if a natural disaster like a massive earthquake disrupted the harmonic resonance of the crystal lattice, the failure would be catastrophic in a way we can barely conceive. It wouldn't be a simple explosion. A critical failure in a time crystal system could trigger a localized rupture in spacetime itself. The very stability of matter and the forward flow of time could have been momentarily shattered around the island. This could manifest as violent gravitational anomalies, sudden tectonic shifts, and the ocean itself behaving in impossible ways, literally swallowing the land in a frenzy of reality unraveling. The single day and night of misfortune becomes a scientifically plausible, if terrifying, outcome of a technology that failed while playing with the deepest laws of the universe. So if this technology was indeed real, what would it have looked like in practice, powering the daily life of an entire civilization? Let's paint a picture of an Atlantean morning, not as a world of magic, but as a society running on a physics we are only beginning to comprehend. The first thing you would notice is the light. There are no flickering torches or smoking oil lamps. Instead, the city is illuminated by a gentle, pervasive glow emanating from the very walls and streets themselves. This is the effect of orichalcum, a metal whose atomic structure has been permanently excited or stabilized by the time crystal's resonant field. It emits light without heat, a cold luminescence that bathes the city in a perpetual, energy-efficient dawn. Public squares, temples, and even homes are lit by this ambient radiance, creating a world without darkness and without the constant labor of maintaining a flame. This limitless, clean energy would have revolutionized every facet of their existence. Consider transportation. Instead of horse-drawn chariots, you might see sleek vehicles gliding silently along paved roads, not on wheels but levitating slightly above the ground. These transports wouldn't need an internal combustion engine or bulky batteries. They could be powered by induction, drawing energy directly from the city-wide field generated by the central time crystal core. The concentric canals Plato described, often seen as mere moats for defense, could have served a dual purpose as superconducting channels, guiding this energy throughout the island with minimal loss. Even maritime travel would be transformed. Atlantean ships, crafted from materials stabilized by the same technology, could potentially manipulate local gravitational or water resistance fields, allowing them to cut through the ocean with incredible speed and stability, explaining their legendary naval dominance. The impact on agriculture and food production would be just as profound. With a controlled, stable energy source, the Atlanteans could have mastered hydroponics and climate control on a massive scale. Imagine vast, enclosed gardens where the temperature, humidity, and light are perfectly regulated year-round, producing abundant harvests regardless of the external seasons. This would eliminate famine and create a surplus that frees the population from back-breaking agricultural labor. Water desalination and purification would be trivial, turning seawater into fresh drinking water for fountains, baths, and irrigation with ease. The society's legendary abundance, where the earth provided all they needed, could be a direct result of this technological mastery over their environment, not a supernatural blessing. But the most astounding applications might have been in the realm of what we would call advanced machinery and computing. The stable, periodic oscillation of a time crystal is a natural clock, a timekeeping mechanism of unimaginable precision. This could have been the foundation for incredibly advanced astronomy and navigation. Their temples might not just have been places of worship, but sophisticated observatories with mechanical or even optical computers capable of predicting celestial events with an accuracy that would seem miraculous to other ancient cultures. Furthermore, the quantum coherent properties of such a system could have allowed for forms of information processing we are only now dreaming of with quantum computing. While they wouldn't have had silicon chips, they might have used crystalline structures or fluidic systems to perform complex calculations, aiding in their architectural marvels and city planning. This vision transforms Atlantis from a mythical golden age into a plausible, hyper-advanced technological utopia. The power source wasn't a simple fire that needed feeding. It was an integrated, ambient feature of their world, as ubiquitous and invisible as the air they breathe. It powered their lights, their vehicles, their food supply, and their science, creating a standard of living that would have appeared godlike to any outside observer. This level of technological harmony with their environment points to a civilization that had solved the fundamental problems of energy scarcity and entropy, at least on a local scale. They had built a paradise not through dominance over nature, but through a deep and sophisticated understanding of its most subtle laws. But perhaps the most enduring testament to their technological prowess would have been the buildings themselves. Plato vividly described massive walls plated in precious metals, but what if the true marvel was not their opulence but their impossible durability? Imagine structures that seem to defy the relentless passage of centuries, showing no signs of wear, erosion, or decay. This is where the concept of time crystal technology moves from a theoretical power source to a tangible architectural reality. We can hypothesize that the Atlanteans didn't just use this knowledge for energy. They embedded its principles directly into the very fabric of their cities, creating buildings that were, in a sense, alive and in a perpetual state of stability. Think about the greatest architectural challenges facing ancient and even modern builders: the constant battle against the elements. Wind, water, and the subtle shifting of the earth gradually wear down even the most solid stone. But what if an entire structure could be engineered to exist in a state of delicate harmony with time itself? A time crystal's defining characteristic is its periodic, repeating motion in its ground state. Now apply that concept to the atomic lattice of a building material. Instead of chaotic atoms slowly succumbing to entropy, the material could be tuned to a stable, oscillating rhythm. This wouldn't make the building indestructible to a sudden, massive force, but it would make it virtually immune to the slow, grinding decay of nature. Normal erosion relies on the gradual breakdown of molecular bonds. In a time crystal-stabilized material, those bonds would be constantly reaffirming themselves, resetting to their original state in a continuous, microscopic cycle. A scratch on a wall might slowly heal as the atoms realign to their programmed pattern. Oxidation, the process that turns iron to rust, will be countered by the material's inherent tendency to return to its pristine form. This idea of self-repairing structures is not pure fantasy. We see echoes of it in nature. Our own bodies are a testament to complex systems that constantly repair and renew themselves. The Atlanteans may have taken this biological principle and applied it to inert matter through their advanced physics. The glowing metal orichalcum, often described as radiating a fiery light, might have been the key component. It could have acted as a crystalline seed or a catalyst within the construction materials. When mixed with stone or other metals, its unique atomic structure could have imposed its stable rhythm on the surrounding matter, creating a composite material with regenerative properties. The entire city, with its concentric design, might have acted as a giant resonator, amplifying this stabilizing effect across the entire metropolis. Walking through Atlantis would have been an uncanny experience. The streets would have felt impossibly smooth, the corners of buildings perfectly sharp, as if they had been carved only yesterday, even after standing for 1,000 years. There would be no cracks, no moss, no weathering a city frozen in a state of perpetual newness. Another, even more mind-bending possibility is that these structures didn't just resist time, they interacted with it differently. A time crystal exists out of sync with its environment, ticking to its own internal clock. What if the Atlanteans learned to scale this effect? they might have been able to engineer a localized temporal field around their most important buildings, causing them to exist slightly phase-shifted from the normal flow of time. From the outside, a temple might appear solid and permanent, but on a quantum level, it could be oscillating in and out of phase with the surrounding world. The corrosive effects of wind and water, which rely on continuous interaction over time, would have a diminished effect. It would be like trying to erode a stone by only being able to touch it for a fraction of a second every minute. The cumulative damage that defines aging would be drastically reduced. This wouldn't be time travel, but rather a form of temporal insulation, protecting the structure from the full brunt of entropy. The psychological and cultural impact of living in such an environment would have been profound. For the Atlanteans, impermanence would not have been a fact of life. Their achievements, carved in this seemingly eternal stone, would have fostered a culture of immense confidence and perhaps, ultimately, the hubris that Plato warns of. They lived in a world they had mastered so completely that they had even tamed the decay of their own creations. This vision of Atlantis transforms its architecture from mere shelter into the ultimate expression of their technological philosophy. A civilization not just building for the present but engineering for eternity. Their buildings were not just monuments, they were a declaration that they had unlocked the secrets of the universe itself, creating a legacy meant to withstand not just centuries but millennia. The tragic irony, of course, is that this very attempt to defy time may have been the catalyst for the temporal cataclysm that ultimately consumed them. Now consider how this mastery over matter and energy would have translated to their most legendary domain, the open ocean. Plato specifically highlights the naval supremacy of Atlantis, describing a mighty fleet that allowed them to project power across the ancient world. But what if their ships were not just wooden hulls with sails, but sophisticated vessels powered by the same principles that stabilized their buildings? Imagine an Atlantean warship, its hull plated not with simple bronze, but with orichalcum-infused alloys. This wouldn't be merely for show. As the ship moved, the resonant field generated by its material could interact with the water molecules around it, effectively reducing drag to near zero. Instead of fighting against the ocean's resistance, the vessel would glide through the waves with an impossible smoothness and speed, leaving almost no wake. Such a ship could achieve velocities that would be unimaginable to any contemporary civilization, explaining how Atlantis could command an empire stretching across the vast Atlantic. The power source for these incredible journeys would likely have been centralized yet distributed. Each ship might not have carried a massive, independent time crystal reactor. Instead, they could have been equipped with smaller, tuned resonators, perhaps crafted from orichalcum or other crystalline materials that acted as receivers. Before a long voyage, a vessel might be charged within the resonant field of the city's central power core, aligning its own oscillator with the master rhythm. Once at sea, this resonator would continue its perpetual motion, drawing ambient energy from the ocean itself, from the heat differential between water depths, the kinetic energy of waves, or even subtle geothermal vents on the seafloor. This energy would then be focused to power propulsion systems that had no moving parts, creating a field around the ship that essentially pushed against the water itself, propelling it forward silently and efficiently. There would be no need for banks of rowers or vast, vulnerable sails, giving Atlantean ships a relentless and independent range far beyond any other navy. This technology could have enabled feats that sound like pure magic. The most astounding possibility involves not just traveling on the water, but mastering the world beneath it. For deep-sea exploration or covert military operations, an Atlantean vessel might have been able to generate a stable bubble around itself, not just of air but of altered physical laws. By using its resonator to create a localized temporal field, the ship could effectively phase-shift itself slightly out of sync with the surrounding ocean. Water, which is normally an impassable barrier, would flow around this bubble of stabilized space-time as if it weren't there. The crew would be protected from the crushing pressures of the deep, and the ship could journey to the ocean's greatest depths, exploring underwater mountain ranges and trenches that remain mysterious to this day. These wouldn't be submarines as we understand them. They would be vessels that temporarily created their own pocket of reality, allowing them to treat the deep sea as just another traversable domain. Navigation across the trackless ocean would have been another area of profound advancement. Without recognizable coastlines or stars to guide them during long voyages or stormy weather, the Atlanteans would have needed a flawless method of orientation. Their time crystal technology could have provided the ultimate solution, a perfect inertial guidance system. The core of a time crystal is its unwavering periodic oscillation, a natural clock of impeccable accuracy. On board each ship, a master resonator could have acted as this clock. By comparing its steady rhythm to the subtle variations in the ambient energy fields of the Earth, its magnetic fields, gravitational gradients, or even the resonant frequency of the planet's crust, the ship's navigators could have triangulated their position with pinpoint precision, regardless of weather or visibility. This would be like having a constant, unjammable global positioning system thousands of years before satellites. They wouldn't be guessing their way across the waves. They would be charting courses with the certainty of a modern pilot, turning the vast and frightening ocean into a mapped and manageable highway. This level of naval technology completely recontextualizes the threat Atlantis posed to the ancient world, as described by Plato. To the fledgling civilizations of the Mediterranean, an Atlantean fleet would have appeared as something utterly supernatural. Their ships would arrive with impossible speed, emerging silently from the deep fog or even from beneath the waves themselves without warning. They could operate indefinitely, never needing to return to port for supplies or repairs, as their self-sustaining power and self-repairing hulls made them nearly autonomous. This wasn't just a superior navy, it was a force that seemed to command the sea itself, making resistance seem futile. The legendary conflict between Atlantis and ancient Athens takes on a new dimension. It becomes a struggle between an emerging, land-based culture and a seemingly omnipotent thalassocracy whose power was rooted in a science so advanced it blurred the line between technology and divinity. The gods themselves, watching from Olympus, might have been fearful of a civilization that had so thoroughly mastered the domain of Poseidon. All of this incredible technology, from the self-repairing walls to the ocean-defying ships, points toward a central, unifying source. At the very core of the Atlantean legend, recurring in countless modern interpretations, is the image of a great crystal, a colossal gemstone that powered the entire civilization. But what if we've been simplifying this concept? What if this was not just a glowing rock that emitted energy like a nuclear reactor, but something infinitely more sophisticated and strange? The true secret of Atlantis may not have been a crystal that generated power, but a crystal that mastered time itself, a massive, engineered time crystal that acted as the beating heart and the central clock for the entire city. Think of this great crystal not as a battery, but as the conductor of a grand, city-wide symphony. In an orchestra, every musician plays their own instrument, but it is the conductor's steady, unwavering rhythm that synchronizes the violins with the cellos, the brass with the woodwinds, creating a harmonious piece of music instead of a cacophony of noise. The great crystal of Atlantis would have served a similar purpose. It's unlikely that every single device, from a household light to a seafaring vessel, contained its own independent, full-scale time crystal. That would be chaotic and unstable. Instead, the central crystal would have been the master oscillator, the one structure perfectly tuned to a specific perpetual rhythm. Its primary function was to broadcast this stable, resonant frequency across the entire island, synchronizing all the smaller, simpler resonators embedded in the technology throughout the city. This concept of synchronization is a known phenomenon in physics called entrainment. A classic example is placing several pendulum clocks on the same wall. Over time, despite starting at different times, their pendulums will eventually swing in perfect unison, their rhythms locked together by the subtle vibrations transmitted through the wall. The Great Crystal would have been the ultimate source of such a synchronizing pulse, but on a monumental scale. The concentric rings of land and water that characterized the Atlantean capital were not just for show or defense. They were likely a carefully designed waveguide, an architectural system engineered to carry and amplify this resonant frequency to every corner of the metropolis. This ensured that every piece of technology, every tuned piece of orichalcum, was operating in perfect harmonic phase with the central source. The practical implications of this are staggering. With a perfectly synchronized network, energy transfer could become almost 100% efficient. A vehicle drawing power from the city's field would receive it in a smooth, continuous flow with no power spikes or drops. The self-repairing properties of buildings would be consistently maintained as the atomic lattice of their materials was constantly reset by the master rhythm. Even the societal functions could have been regulated by this pervasive pulse. Imagine a civilization without the need for sundials or hourglasses, where the very air hummed with a rhythm that dictated the pace of life, perhaps even synchronizing with natural biological cycles to promote health and well-being. The entire city would have functioned as a single, cohesive, living machine. The engineering of such a crystal would have been the pinnacle of Atlantean science. It might not have been a naturally formed quartz or diamond, but a complex composite structure grown or assembled atom by atom. It could have incorporated layers of different materials, each designed to resonate at a specific harmonic, creating a rich, stable waveform capable of carrying vast amounts of information and influence. The legendary glowing metal, orichalcum, might have been a key component in its construction, acting as a superconducting conduit that channeled the crystal's energy without loss. Maintaining the stability of this central crystal would have been the most sacred and crucial task for the Atlantean priest scientists, a duty that balanced their society on a knife's edge between a technological utopia and unimaginable disaster. The crystal's perfect rhythm was the foundation upon which their entire world was built, a delicate dance with the laws of physics that granted them power beyond dreams, but at a cost that would ultimately prove catastrophic. This mastery over the fundamental rhythms of nature would have extended far beyond their cities and ships, reaching into the very soil that fed their civilization. To understand the legendary wealth and abundance of Atlantis, we need to consider its most fundamental resource, food. A society freed from the constant struggle for sustenance is a society with the time and energy to achieve greatness. For the Atlanteans, agriculture would not have been a gamble against the seasons or the weather. It would have been a precise, controlled science. Imagine vast, open-air fields where crops grew in perfect, perpetual health, completely unaffected by frost, drought, or pest. This wasn't magic, it was the application of their temporal technology to biology. By creating localized fields with subtly altered time flow, they could have effectively extended the growing season indefinitely. A day inside one of these zones might feel like a week to the plants within, accelerating their growth cycles without the genetic manipulation we use today. They could harvest wheat or fruit multiple times a year from the same plot of land, creating a food surplus so immense that hunger was an unknown concept. But the true marvels would have been their enclosed gardens, structures that made the hanging gardens of Babylon look primitive. These were not simple greenhouses using glass to trap heat. They were sophisticated biospheres where the climate was not just controlled but engineered. Using the same resonant principles that powered their city, the Atlanteans could have created stable, isolated microclimates within these enclosures. One garden could maintain the warm, humid conditions of a tropical rainforest, perfect for cultivating exotic fruits and spices, while right next door, another could replicate the cool, crisp air of a mountain valley for growing specialized grains. The key was stability. our modern agriculture is vulnerable to sudden heat waves or cold snaps that can wipe out entire harvests. An Atlantean climate zone, however, would have been locked into its perfect state by the regulating influence of the central time crystal. The temperature, humidity, and even the concentration of specific gases in the air would remain constant, day and night, summer and winter. This allowed them to cultivate any plant species from anywhere in the world, creating a botanical empire that contributed to their vast wealth through trade and their unparalleled quality of life. The method of nurturing these plants would have been just as advanced. We can envision agriculture that had moved beyond soil. They likely mastered hydroponics and aeroponics on a grand scale, with nutrient-rich water flowing through channels that were themselves resonating with the city's energy field. This wouldn't just deliver food to the plants. The structured, coherent energy could have stimulated root growth and nutrient uptake at a cellular level, leading to larger, more nutritious and more flavorful produce. Water, the lifeblood of any farm, would have been effortlessly managed. Desalination plants powered by the ambient energy grid could have turned the surrounding ocean into an endless supply of fresh water for irrigation. And this water itself might have been structured or energized by passing it through crystalline conduits, perhaps enhancing its ability to nourish plant life. Every variable, from the molecular composition of the water to the precise spectrum of light the plants received from the glowing orichalcum panels above, would have been optimized for maximum yield and quality. This agricultural revolution would have had profound social consequences. With such an abundant and reliable food supply, the vast majority of the population was liberated from back-breaking farm labor. This freed up an enormous workforce to become scientists, artists, engineers, and explorers. It also meant their society could support a much larger population in health and comfort, fueling the growth of their majestic cities. The reported wealth of Atlantis, often interpreted as gold and jewels, likely had a much more stable foundation, the wealth of guaranteed sustenance. They could trade surplus food and unique, out-of-season spices with other, less advanced civilizations, establishing economic dominance. But perhaps the most significant impact was on their relationship with the natural world. They weren't conquerors of the land, struggling to wrest a meal from it. They were master cultivators working in harmony with enhanced natural processes. This deep understanding of life cycles and growth, all made possible by their command over time and energy, would have fostered a culture that saw itself not as separate from nature, but as its ultimate steward, a perspective that makes their eventual fall from grace, as told by Plato, all the more tragic. Perhaps the most personal and profound impact of such a technology, however, would have been felt not in their cities or their ships, but within their own bodies. The legends often speak of the Atlanteans as a people blessed with extraordinary health and extended lifespans, living in a state of physical perfection that seemed almost divine. What if this wasn't a gift from the gods, but the ultimate application of their science, a mastery over the biological processes of life itself? If they could stabilize the atomic structure of stone to prevent decay, could they not apply the same principles to the cellular structures of a living being? The medical applications of time crystal technology could have transformed their entire experience of life, health, and mortality. Imagine their approach to healing. A deep wound that would take weeks or months to mend naturally could be addressed not with simple stitches and poultices, but with a resonant field designed to accelerate the body's own repair mechanisms. In this scenario, the rhythmic, stable oscillation of a time crystal could be tuned to synchronize with the natural frequency of cell division and tissue regeneration. A patient would be placed within a chamber or near a device emitting this specific harmonic field. The effect wouldn't be a magical instant cure, but rather a profound acceleration of the body's innate healing intelligence. The chaotic inflammation that follows an injury could be calmed and guided. The process of mitosis, where cells divide to create new tissue, could be stimulated and made more efficient, drastically reducing recovery times from days to hours. Broken bones might knit together with perfect alignment in a fraction of the normal time, and infections could be fought by enhancing the coordinated response of the immune system, all orchestrated by this external, stabilizing rhythm. This technology could have also offered a revolutionary approach to surgery. One of the greatest challenges in any complex operation is the trauma caused by the procedure itself, the bleeding, the shock to the system. The Atlanteans might have developed a method to induce a state of biological stasis. By using a carefully calibrated resonant frequency, they could have learned to temporarily slow down or even pause the metabolic processes in a specific area of the body or even the entire organism. A surgeon could then operate on a heart or a brain with virtually no blood loss, as the patient's biological functions were held in a state of suspended animation. This would allow for incredibly precise and delicate interventions that are impossible today, turning life-threatening procedures into manageable operations. After the surgery, the resonant field would be gradually withdrawn, allowing the body's functions to return to normal speed, now free from the original ailment. The most sought-after application, and the one that truly fuels the legend of their long lives, would have been the battle against aging. Aging, from a biological perspective, is largely the cumulative effect of entropy at a cellular level. It's the gradual breakdown of systems, the accumulation of errors in DNA replication, the slowing down of regenerative processes. A society that had developed a technology to combat entropy in non-living matter would have inevitably turned its attention to this ultimate challenge. Their goal would not have been immortality in the fictional sense, but what we might call negligible senescence, a state where the body's decline is arrested and health span is extended dramatically. The Atlantean approach might have involved regular treatments in specialized temples of health, where individuals were bathed in resonant fields designed to promote cellular repair and detoxification. These sessions could have worked by encouraging the body to more efficiently clear out damaged cells and proteins, while stimulating the production of fresh, healthy tissue. Telomeres, the protective caps on our chromosomes that shorten with each cell division, might have been maintained or even lengthened through this harmonic rejuvenation. The societal impact of such medical prowess would have been immeasurable, with lifespans potentially extending to several hundred years in a state of vibrant health. An Atlantean citizen could accumulate knowledge and wisdom across centuries. A master architect could oversee the construction of a city over multiple generations, ensuring a consistency of vision we can't achieve today. Scientists and philosophers would have the time to develop ideas of incredible depth and complexity. This extended timeline would fundamentally alter their perception of the world, fostering a culture of long-term planning and profound patience. The stories of their wise, ancient kings would be grounded in a biological reality where a ruler could guide his people for a dozen normal human lifetimes. Yet, this incredible gift would also have presented its own unique challenges and perhaps sown the seeds of their downfall. With death pushed so far into the distance, how would a society manage population growth? Would a rigid class system emerge where the powerful maintained their health and position indefinitely? The moral and ethical dilemmas of such a technology are as staggering as the technology itself, hinting at a civilization that had conquered disease and decay, but may have struggled with the very human problems of power, ambition, and the meaning of a life that stretches on for centuries. This command over the very substance of life and matter points toward an even greater ambition, one that lies at the heart of any advanced civilization: the pursuit of knowledge. If the Atlanteans could manipulate time and energy to heal bodies and grow food, it stands to reason they would apply these principles to the most precious resource of all, information. Their legendary wisdom, described by Plato as unparalleled, may have been rooted in a technology that transformed how they communicated and stored knowledge, creating a network so advanced it blurred the lines between the present, the past, and even the future. Imagine a society not limited by scrolls or oral histories, but one that had built a living library woven into the fabric of reality itself. The foundation of this system would once again be the great crystal, the master oscillator that pulsed with a perfect, stable rhythm. But its function would have extended beyond synchronizing energy. It could have synchronized information. We can envision the entire city as a giant organic computer. The concentric rings of land and water might have acted as a massive data conduit, while the orichalcum-plated buildings served as both storage nodes and transceivers. In this model, information wouldn't be stored as static symbols on a page, but as dynamic, resonant patterns within the crystalline structure of the city itself. A thought, a historical record, or a complex scientific formula could be encoded as a specific vibrational frequency and impressed upon the network where it would persist, echoing in harmony with the central crystal's endless rhythm. To access this knowledge, a citizen wouldn't need to go to a physical library. Instead, they might use a personal resonator, perhaps a small, tuned crystal worn as an amulet or held in the hand, which would allow their mind to attune to the specific frequency of the information they sought. This wouldn't be reading, it would be a form of direct cognition, a downloading of pure understanding directly into consciousness, explaining the profound and intuitive wisdom attributed to the Atlanteans. This technology could have revolutionized communication, making distance and delay obsolete. Two individuals on opposite ends of the island, or even a captain at sea and a commander in the capital, could communicate instantaneously. Their thoughts, encoded as resonant patterns, would be broadcast through the network, traveling at the speed of the crystal's synchronizing pulse, a speed that could theoretically be instantaneous within the localized field. This isn't like our radio waves, which are limited by the speed of light. This is a form of quantum entanglement or non-local communication facilitated by the coherent state of the entire system. A council of kings could debate complex strategies in real time, with each participant perceiving the other's arguments with perfect clarity, free from the misunderstandings of spoken language. This seamless flow of information would create a society of incredible cohesion and collective intelligence, where the best ideas could be shared and refined without any barrier. The most astounding possibility, however, involves the very nature of time that the crystals manipulated. If their technology allowed them to create stable oscillations in the ground state of matter, could it also have allowed them to perceive echoes from other points in time? A time crystal's defining feature is its existence in a repeating cycle, a loop. What if the Atlantean information network could tap into these loops? It's conceivable that their system wasn't just a record of what they had chosen to store, but a sensitive instrument that could detect informational residues left on the fabric of space-time. Major events imbued with tremendous energy or emotion might leave an imprint, a kind of psychic fossil. Their seers or scientists using the network might have learned to tune into these ancient echoes, gaining glimpses of historical events or cosmic occurrences from thousands of years before their own time. This would explain the vast, primordial knowledge the Egyptians claimed the Atlanteans possessed, a knowledge not just of their own history, but of the deep past of the Earth itself. This leads to the most speculative and profound application, the potential to perceive potential futures. In quantum mechanics, the future is not a single, predetermined path, but a spectrum of probabilities. A system as sensitive as the Atlantean network, operating outside the normal flow of linear time, might have been able to detect the faint, probabilistic vibrations of events that had not yet come to pass. This wouldn't be like seeing a precise, unchangeable prophecy. It would be more like observing a weather forecast, a reading of the most likely outcomes based on the current state of energy and information in the world. The legendary oracles of Atlantis, then, would not have been mystics relying on vague visions, but highly trained technicians interpreting complex data from the network. They could advise their leaders on the probable consequences of a proposed war or a new technological application, guiding their civilization away from dangerous paths and toward prosperous ones. This ability to peer into the tapestry of cause and effect would have given them an unparalleled strategic advantage and would have been the ultimate source of their famed wisdom. Yet it also presents a terrifying paradox. If they could see the potential for their own downfall, what actions did they take to try to prevent it? And in doing so, did they inadvertently set the very catastrophe in motion? Yet, for all its brilliance, this vast technological network likely had a dark and closely guarded secret at its core. It's one thing to imagine a society thriving on such power. It's another to consider why this knowledge wasn't shared freely, why it might have been considered too dangerous for the general populace. This brings us to the most unsettling aspect of Atlantean lore, the idea that their greatest achievement was also their most forbidden. The ruling class, the enlightened priest-kings who understood the technology's true nature, would have been faced with ethical dilemmas of a scale we can barely comprehend. The power to manipulate time, even on a local scale, isn't just a tool. It's a responsibility that carries risks so profound that restricting its use would have been a matter of survival. The most immediate danger would have been the threat of paradox. While the Atlanteans likely didn't have time travel in the science fiction sense of visiting the distant past or future, their ability to create localized temporal fields and perceive probabilistic futures would have presented a similar problem. Imagine a scenario where an oracle using the city's network foresees a terrible disaster like a ship sinking in a storm. The rulers, acting on this information, dispatch a rescue fleet that saves the crew. But what if that very rescue mission inadvertently alters events in a way that leads to an even greater catastrophe? Perhaps the rescued sailors introduce a plague to the mainland, or their survival triggers a political conflict that erupts into a devastating war. The ability to act on foresight creates a chain of causality that is impossible to fully predict, a classic grandfather paradox where the act of preventing an event can become the very cause of it. For the Atlantean leadership, every intervention based on their temporal sight would have been a gamble with reality itself, a reason to keep such powerful divination tools under the strictest control. Beyond accidental consequences, the potential for weaponization would have been terrifyingly real. We've already considered ships that could phase through the deep ocean, but what if that same principle was applied offensively? A temporal weapon wouldn't just destroy a target, it could erase it from the continuity of existence. Imagine a device that could project a field of accelerated time around an enemy fleet. In a matter of seconds, the wooden hulls would rot to dust, the metal fittings would rust into nothing, and the crew would age to skeletons and then to dust, all while the surrounding sea remained unchanged. Conversely, a field of decelerated time could freeze a city in a single moment, trapping its inhabitants in an unbreakable stasis bubble for eternity. The most horrifying weapon of all might have been one that created a localized temporal singularity, a bubble where time's arrow shattered completely, causing matter to unravel into chaos. The existence of such arms would have made conventional warfare obsolete, but their use would risk creating unstable rifts in spacetime that could spread uncontrollably. Possessing this power would have forced the Atlantean kings into a permanent state of Cold War, not with other nations, but with the catastrophic potential of their own technology. This leads to the most profound reason for secrecy, the societal imbalance such power would create. In a civilization where a privileged few had access to extended lifespans, perfect health, and near-omniscient knowledge, a vast gulf would inevitably open between the rulers and the ruled. The common people might have enjoyed the benefits of the technology, the abundant food, the clean energy, the comfortable homes, but they would have been utterly dependent on the ruling class to maintain the system. This creates a perfect recipe for a technocratic dictatorship, albeit one that might have been seen as benevolent. The kings and priests wouldn't just be political leaders, They would be the guardians of reality itself, the only ones with the wisdom to wield the power of the gods. Sharing this knowledge freely would have been unthinkably risky. What if a misguided individual attempted to modify the great crystal out of curiosity or malice? What if a faction, dissatisfied with its place in society, learned to create its own temporal weapons? The stability of the entire civilization rested on the premise that this ultimate power remained in the hands of a small, rigorously trained and philosophically aligned elite. The very concept of forbidden knowledge is central to many ancient myths, from the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden to Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. These stories always carry a warning: some powers are too great for humanity to handle responsibly. The legend of Atlantis can be seen as the ultimate expression of this theme. The downfall of the civilization, as told by Plato, was not caused by an external enemy but by internal corruption. The divine portion within them faded, he writes, and they became filled with unjust ambition. This suggests that the technology itself was not inherently evil, but it had a corrupting influence. The intoxicating sense of power, the ability to heal any wound, to see the future, to command the seas, would inevitably lead to hubris. The ruling class, initially wise stewards, might have begun to see themselves not as guardians but as gods. They may have started using the technology for personal aggrandizement, for conquest, or for reckless experiments that pushed the boundaries of what was safe. The forbidden aspect of the tech, therefore, was likely a two-edged sword. It was kept secret to protect the people from its dangers, but that very secrecy may have insulated the rulers from accountability, allowing their arrogance to grow until it triggered the very catastrophe their wisdom was meant to prevent. But this profound understanding of time's flow brings us to the most chilling chapter of the Atlantean saga: the corruption of their knowledge into instruments of war. The same principles that could heal a body or grow a harvest could, with a sinister twist, be engineered to become the most terrifying weaponry ever conceived. Imagine the horror of a battlefield where the arrows flying toward you don't just carry sharp points, but project a field of accelerated time. A soldier struck would not feel a piercing pain, but would watch in agony as his own hand withered and aged before his eyes, his skin wrinkling and his bones becoming brittle, his life force draining away in mere heartbeats. An entire platoon could be reduced to dust-covered skeletons in the space of a single minute, their armor rusting into flakes as they crumbled to the ground. This wasn't a weapon that killed. It was a weapon that delivered the inevitable end of a lifetime in an instant, a brutal and grotesque perversion of the life-extending technology the Atlanteans held so dear. The strategic applications of such temporal weaponry would have been as diverse as they were horrifying. For siege warfare, why bother building massive catapults to break down walls when you could deploy a resonator that destabilized the very temporal field holding the stone together? A city's mighty fortifications, which had stood for centuries, could begin to fracture and dissolve as if subjected to 1,000 years of wind and rain in a single afternoon. The defenders would watch in helpless terror as their security literally turned to sand before them. Naval combat would be equally one-sided. An Atlantean warship could project a field of decelerated time onto the surface of the ocean ahead of an enemy fleet. The water would instantaneously become a prison of super-dense, near-solid ice-like consistency, trapping ships in an unbreakable grip while the Atlantean vessel maneuvered freely. The enemy sailors would be frozen not in cold, but in time itself, trapped in a single, eternal moment of panic, their ships becoming ghostly monuments stuck between heartbeats. Perhaps the most psychologically devastating weapon would have been the creation of localized time loops. Instead of destroying a target, the Atlanteans could have imprisoned them. Imagine a general or a king captured not in a dungeon, but within a bubble of repeating time, forced to relive the same 10-second interval, the moment of their greatest shame or most catastrophic mistake, for what would feel like an eternity. This would be a fate worse than death, a perfect, inescapable hell designed to break the strongest will. On a larger scale, an entire region could be sealed off within such a loop, creating a forbidden zone where history endlessly repeated itself, a warning to any who dared challenge Atlantean authority. The very landscape would become a trap, with explorers vanishing into areas that appeared normal but from which no one ever returned, their consciousness forever cycling through a meaningless fragment of time. The ultimate and most forbidden application of this dark science would have been the attempt to not just manipulate time, but to erase it entirely. The concept of unwriting an event from history represents the apex of hubris. We can speculate that the Atlantean high priests theorized about creating a temporal singularity, a point where the local flow of time collapses in on itself. The goal wouldn't be destruction in the physical sense, but a kind of conceptual deletion, an embarrassing military defeat, the rise of a rival leader. Even the existence of an entire city could, in theory, be targeted. The resonator would be tuned to the unique energetic signature of the event and activated, creating a shockwave that would sever the causal link between the past and the present. For everyone outside the effect, it would be as if the targeted event had never happened. Memories would blur, records would become inexplicable, and the timeline would heal over the wound, leaving only a faint, haunting sense of something missing. This was the ultimate censorship, a power that attacked reality itself, and its potential for catastrophic paradox would have made it the most guarded and feared secret in the Atlantean arsenal. The mere knowledge that such a capability existed would have been enough to keep every rival civilization in a state of terrified submission, but it also represented a point of no return in their technological arrogance. This incredible power, capable of healing and destruction on a godlike scale, inevitably leads us to the final, chilling question: what truly happened to Atlantis? If their civilization was built upon a technology that manipulated the very fabric of time, then its collapse may not have been a simple act of divine punishment or a random geological event. The legend speaks of a single day and night of destruction, a cataclysm so swift and complete that an entire island empire vanished beneath the waves. This description aligns disturbingly well with the potential consequences of a critical failure in their time crystal network. We are not talking about an earthquake or a tsunami in the conventional sense, but a technological apocalypse of a kind we can scarcely imagine, a rupture in space-time itself. The most plausible trigger for such a disaster would have been a cascading feedback loop within the Great Crystal. Think of the entire Atlantean power grid as a perfectly tuned orchestra with the central crystal as its conductor. For centuries, every component resonated in perfect harmony, but what if that harmony was disrupted? Perhaps the Atlanteans, in their growing arrogance and ambition, attempted to scale up the system's power output to fuel their wars of conquest, pushing the crystal's oscillations beyond their stable limits. Or maybe a massive natural event, like a sudden shift in the Earth's tectonic plates, sent a powerful shockwave through the resonant network. This external jolt would have been like a deafening screech of feedback in a sound system. The master rhythm, once perfect and stable, would have become distorted, sending chaotic, amplified vibrations racing through the waveguides of the concentric canals. In a system governing localized time, this kind of feedback wouldn't just cause a power outage. It would unravel the delicate balance of reality around the island. The technology that kept their buildings eternally new relied on a consistent, repeating temporal pulse. A corrupted pulse would have the opposite effect. We can envision a wave of accelerated time sweeping across the city. Structures that had stood for millennia would not just crumble, they would undergo rapid, hyper-accelerated decay, as if thousands of years of erosion happened in seconds. Towers would dissolve into dust, and streets would crack and fissure in an instant. Conversely, other areas might be hit by a wave of temporal stagnation where time simply stopped. People would be frozen in place, caught in a single, eternal moment while the world collapsed around them. The very ground under their feet would become unstable as the geological strata experienced time at violently different rates, leading to catastrophic, reality-shattering earthquakes. An even more terrifying possibility is that the failure created a temporal paradox on a massive scale. The Atlantean oracles used their network to perceive probable futures and guide their society. But what if their own actions, based on these visions, created an unsolvable logical knot? Imagine the central crystal, which was likely integral to this foresight, becoming overloaded with contradictory data. It might have been trying to calculate a future that its own predictions were constantly changing. This could have caused a recursive loop in the flow of information within the crystal, a kind of computational meltdown that didn't just break the machine, but broke the local flow of causality. The result could have been a temporal rift, a tear in the continuum where the past, present, and future bled together. The island might have been simultaneously experiencing its foundation, its golden age, and its destruction all at once, a chaos of overlapping timelines that would literally tear matter apart. This theory provides a hauntingly precise explanation for Plato's account. The island wasn't just flooded, it was swallowed by the sea. A massive space-time rupture would not simply allow water to flow in. It could create violent gravitational anomalies, pulling the ocean down into a vortex or distorting the seafloor instantly. The event was swift, a single day and night, because the collapse of a stabilized temporal field would be almost instantaneous, a chain reaction moving at the speed of causality. There would have been no time to escape, no slow sinking. The civilization that had mastered time would have been consumed by the very force it sought to control. The cataclysm was so complete that it left no obvious trace because the island wasn't just submerged. It was fundamentally unmade, its atoms scattered across time itself. The story of Atlantis, therefore, stands as history's most profound warning about the dangers of reaching for powers we are not yet wise enough to hold. The story of Atlantis, as compelling as it is, does not exist in a vacuum. If such a technologically advanced civilization truly flourished and fell in the distant past, would its memory have been completely lost, or would echoes of its existence have reverberated across the globe, carried by survivors or whispered along ancient trade routes? When we turn our gaze from the Atlantic to the myths of other great cultures, we find a startling number of parallel stories of lost worlds, godlike beings, and impossible technologies that sound less like primitive fantasies and more like distorted accounts of a shared, forgotten reality. These global legends form a collective mosaic, suggesting that the concept of a pre-flood, high-tech society might be a universal human memory, with Atlantis representing just one prominent chapter in a much larger story. Consider the ancient Indian epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. Within these vast texts, far older than Plato's writings, we find detailed descriptions of flying machines known as vimanas. These are not vague references to magical carpets or winged horses. They are technical accounts of sophisticated aircraft. The texts describe vimanas as being powered by mercury vortex engines or other mysterious energy sources, capable of traveling vast distances through the air, underwater, and even into space. They are said to have been used for travel, warfare, and surveillance, with some passages detailing weapons of terrifying power that sound unnervingly similar to modern descriptions of lasers and atomic bombs. The level of specificity is astounding, including details about their construction from specific metals, their multi-story designs, and their operational manuals. To dismiss these as mere poetic imagination requires ignoring the consistent and mechanical nature of the descriptions. It seems far more plausible that these are the mythological remnants of a very real, advanced aerospace technology that existed in a forgotten age, a technology that would have been as awe-inspiring to later generations as the Atlantean power source. Journeying to West Africa, we encounter the enigmatic lore of the Dogon people of Mali. their astronomical knowledge has baffled researchers for decades. Long before modern telescopes confirmed it, the Dogon possessed incredibly accurate knowledge about the Sirius star system. They knew that Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, has a tiny, incredibly dense companion star, Sirius B, which is invisible to the naked eye. They understood its 50-year elliptical orbit and correctly described it as being made of a metal heavier than iron, a characteristic of white dwarf stars. According to their oral traditions, this knowledge was given to them by amphibious, fish-like beings called the Nommo, who came from the Sirius system in an arc that spiraled down from the sky. This is not a simple star myth. It is precise, complex astronomical data. The most straightforward explanation is that this information was inherited from a much more advanced culture that possessed sophisticated observational technology, a culture whose legacy, like that of the Atlanteans, was preserved in the sacred stories of its descendants. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific, Polynesian navigators tell of mana, a concept often simplified as a spiritual force or life energy. But in its original, deeper context, mana was a tangible, manipulable power that could be harnessed by skilled individuals. It was the source of a chief's authority and a craftsman's skill, but it was also described as a force that could be channeled to achieve seemingly impossible feats. The great navigators who settled islands across thousands of miles of open ocean were said to possess immense mana, allowing them to read subtle ocean currents, sense distant land, and guide their voyaging canoes with uncanny precision. This sounds less like superstition and more like an intuitive understanding of energy fields and resonance, a practical science encoded in spiritual terms. The idea of a pervasive, harnessable energy that empowers technology and skill is a direct parallel to the ambient power source we theorized for Atlantis. The Polynesian mastery of the Pacific, one of humanity's greatest migration achievements, may have been guided by a diluted yet potent remnant of an ancient science of energy manipulation. Even in the myths of the Norse, we find hints of lost technology. The legendary hammer of Thor, Mjolnir, is described not just as a blunt instrument, but as a weapon that always returns to the thrower's hand. This is a classic property of a boomerang, but the scale and power attributed to Mjolnir suggests something more, a guided projectile or a weapon possessing a homing mechanism. The god Odin's two ravens, Hugin and Munin, who fly across the world each day to bring him news, could be interpreted as a metaphorical description of advanced surveillance drones or satellite technology, providing real-time intelligence to a ruler. While these are embedded in a deeply mythological framework, they follow a pattern of attributing god-like powers to artifacts that perform functions we now achieve with advanced engineering. What emerges from this global survey is a pattern too consistent to ignore. From the Vimanas of India to the cosmic knowledge of the Dogon, from the harnessed mana of the Polynesians to the intelligent artifacts of the Norse, we see recurring themes of flight, energy weaponry, precise astronomy, and the manipulation of natural forces. It is highly improbable that cultures separated by vast oceans and millennia independently invented such specific and technologically resonant concepts. A more compelling explanation is that these myths are the faded reflections of a common source, a global, prehistoric civilization, or a network of advanced cultures that was largely destroyed in a cataclysm. The story of Atlantis, as recorded by Plato, may simply be the most detailed and localized account of this wider event. The great flood myths that appear in over 200 cultures worldwide are not just about water. They symbolize a universal reset, a clean slate after a golden age ended in catastrophe. The survivors, scattered to the corners of the earth, would have carried fragments of their former knowledge with them. Over generations, the precise science behind flying shields and energy crystals would have decayed into the language of gods and magic, but the core memory of that lost power would have endured, waiting for a time when humanity would once again develop the tools to understand what our ancestors were truly describing. Now, as we stand at the dawn of the 21st century, a profound and perhaps unsettling question emerges from the shadows of this ancient legend. Are we, with our particle accelerators and quantum computers, unknowingly walking the same path the Atlanteans once trod? The theoretical concept of time crystals, once dismissed as an impossible fantasy, is now a confirmed reality in laboratories from Harvard to Maryland. Scientists are not just proving their existence, they are actively experimenting with them, exploring their potential to revolutionize computing and our understanding of the universe. This is no longer speculative fiction, it is hard, peer-reviewed science. The very principles we have been exploring as a theoretical foundation for Atlantis's power are being built and tested in clean rooms and under lasers at this very moment. The gap between myth and laboratory is closing at an astonishing rate. Consider the trajectory of this research. Just over a decade ago, the idea was proposed and met with widespread skepticism. Today, researchers have successfully created time crystals using diverse systems, from chains of charged atoms to diamonds with specific impurities. The focus has shifted from if they exist to how we can control and utilize them. The primary application being explored is in the field of quantum computing. Quantum bits or qubits are notoriously fragile, easily losing their quantum state, a problem called decoherence, which ruins calculations. Time crystals, with their inherent stability and resistance to external disruption, could act as perfect quantum memory, protecting information for vastly longer periods. This single breakthrough could be the key that unlocks the true potential of quantum technology, leading to computers that can solve problems in minutes that would take our fastest supercomputers millennia. We are, in essence, learning to build the foundational components for a new kind of information network, one that bears a haunting resemblance to the resonant, crystalline data system we imagined for Atlantis. But the parallels run even deeper than computing. Researchers are also investigating how arrays of time crystals could be used for incredibly precise sensing. Their stable, periodic oscillations are exquisitely sensitive to tiny changes in their environment, such as minuscule fluctuations in temperature, pressure, or magnetic fields. This could lead to sensors of unimaginable accuracy, capable of detecting the gravitational waves from distant cosmic events or identifying a single molecule of a pathogen in the air. Now translate this concept back to our Atlantean hypothesis. Their society, powered by a master time crystal, would have been exquisitely attuned to the subtle energies of the Earth itself. They might have used this sensitivity not for computing, but for geoengineering, stabilizing tectonic plates, or forecasting weather and seismic events with perfect accuracy. The technology we are developing for microscopic sensors might be a nascent version of the same principle they used to manage an entire continent's stability. This rapid progress forces us to confront a truly existential dilemma. Every breakthrough in time crystal research brings with it a dual-use potential that echoes the Atlantean dilemma. The same stability that could protect quantum data could also be the foundation for unbreakable encryption, creating a digital fortress for some and an impenetrable barrier for others. The sensing technology that could detect diseases early could also be used for undetectable surveillance. And while we are not yet talking about temporal weapons, the fundamental physics we are uncovering, the manipulation of quantum states and local energy fields, is the very bedrock upon which such terrifying applications could theoretically be built. We are, right now, in our own version of the Atlantean Golden Age, filled with optimism about the benefits of this new science, but have we developed the wisdom to match our growing power? The story of Atlantis suggests that the technology itself is not the danger. It is the human capacity for arrogance and conflict that transforms a tool of utopia into a weapon of apocalypse. So are we on the verge of accidentally rediscovering Atlantis's technology? In a very real sense, we already are. we are not likely to dig up a glowing crystal orb, but we are painstakingly reverse engineering the principles that might have made it work. We are learning to create matter that ticks to its own rhythm, to build networks that operate on quantum coherence, and to imagine a future powered by physics that defies classical limits. The myth of Atlantis, therefore, may be far more than a fascinating story. It could be a blueprint and simultaneously a warning label. It shows us a potential destination for our current scientific trajectory, complete with both its breathtaking possibilities and its existential risks. As we continue to probe the deepest mysteries of time and matter, we would be wise to remember the fate of that legendary island. The ultimate question is not whether we can achieve such power, but whether we can learn from the past and develop the collective wisdom to wield it responsibly, ensuring that our civilization story does not end with a single day and night of misfortune. This journey from myth to modern physics is compelling, but it inevitably leads us to a much more tangible question. Is there any physical proof on our planet that such an advanced civilization ever existed? For all our theorizing, the most persistent challenge to the Atlantis story has always been the apparent lack of concrete evidence. If a continent-sized island sank beneath the Atlantic Ocean, surely it would have left some trace. This is where our search moves from the pages of ancient texts to the murky depths of the world's oceans, where a series of mysterious underwater formations have sparked intense debate and captured the imagination of explorers for decades. The most famous of these is undoubtedly the Bimini Road. Located off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas, the Bimini Road is a submerged line of massive, rectangular limestone blocks resting on the seafloor in about 20 feet of water. Discovered in 1968, it immediately fueled speculation. The blocks, some of them over 10 feet long, are arranged in a seemingly purposeful, straight line that curves into a distinct J shape stretching for over half a mile. To many observers, this does not look like a natural geological formation. The precise angles and the linear arrangement scream of intelligent design, appearing remarkably like a ruined pier, a causeway, or perhaps the foundation wall of a much larger structure that has since been buried by sand and time. Mainstream geologists, however, offer a more conventional explanation. They argue that the Bimini Road is a prime example of beach rock, a type of limestone that fractures naturally along straight lines due to tidal forces and geological stress. They point out that the blocks are not cut and placed, but are instead part of a single sheet of rock that has broken apart in situ, creating the illusion of a paved road. But the geological explanation fails to satisfy all the curious details. For one, the consistency in the size and shape of the blocks is striking. Furthermore, core samples drilled into the rock have revealed that the blocks are composed of multiple layers, which is unusual for typical beach rock formations. Some researchers have even reported what appear to be tool marks on the stones, though this is heavily disputed. If the Bimini Road is indeed man-made, its location becomes incredibly significant. The Bahamas sit on the western edge of the Bermuda Triangle, a region steeped in lore about mysterious disappearances and anomalous phenomena. More importantly, this area was once a vast, dry landmass during the last ice age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. The coastline of Florida extended far out into what is now the ocean, and the Bahama Banks were a large, exposed plateau. This means the Bimini Road, now underwater, would have been on dry land roughly 12,000 years ago, a date that aligns perfectly with Plato's timeline for the fall of Atlantis. It's not difficult to imagine this structure as part of a coastal installation, a harbor facility for a civilization that mastered sea travel, now submerged by the rising seas that followed the glacial melt. An even more dramatic and controversial site lies on the other side of the world, off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. Discovered by a diver in 1986, the Yonaguni Monument is a colossal underwater structure that resembles a massive stepped pyramid. It features stark, clean-edged terraces, sharp 90-degree angles, and what appear to be staircases, platforms, and even a carved archway. The entire formation is enormous, rising over 80 feet from the seabed. The lead researcher, Professor Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus, has spent decades studying the site and firmly believes it is a man-made, or at least artificially modified, megalithic complex. He points to features that seem to have no natural explanation, such as two closely spaced pillars that appear to support a ceiling, and intricate carvings that resemble animal faces. The opposition to this view is led by another geologist, Robert Schoch of Boston University, who argues that Yonaguni is a spectacular but entirely natural formation. He attributes its angular appearance to the natural fracturing of the sandstone bedrock due to seismic activity and strong underwater currents, which can create surprisingly planar surfaces. The debate between these two expert viewpoints highlights the fundamental challenge of underwater archaeology, distinguishing human handiwork from the powerful and often bizarre sculpting power of nature. Yet, even if Yonaguni is natural, its location is provocative. Like Bimini, the area around Yonaguni was above water at the end of the last ice age. If it was used or modified by humans, it would have been over 10,000 years ago, pushing back the timeline for complex civilization in the region by thousands of years. This alone would force a dramatic rewrite of conventional history, regardless of any connection to Atlantis. What if the true evidence of Atlantean engineering isn't in the shape of the structures, but in the very substance they are made from? This is where our earlier theories about advanced material science could provide a fascinating new lens. Let's reconsider the Bimini roadblocks. Geologists identify them as beak rock, which is a form of limestone cemented together by calcium carbonate. But what if the Atlanteans had a method of artificially accelerating this cementing process, or even of manipulating the molecular structure of stone to give it enhanced properties? If their technology involved resonant frequencies that could influence atomic bonds, as suggested by the time crystal hypothesis, they might have been able to grow or tune construction materials to be more durable and resistant to erosion. The strange consistency and layering of the Bimini stones could be the result of a sophisticated manufacturing process, now so ancient that it is indistinguishable from natural rock to our standard analysis. The Yonaguni monument presents an even more intriguing possibility from this perspective. The primary argument against it being man-made is that the entire structure is made from a single bedrock unit. There are no joined blocks. But what if the builders didn't need to cut and move stones? What if their technology allowed them to work on the landscape itself, softening or manipulating the living rock in situ, carving it with precision tools that left no conventional marks? We are not talking about primitive chisels, but perhaps about devices that used focused sound waves or resonant energy to disaggregate stone along precise planes, effectively melting or vaporizing it away. This would explain the monument's massive, seamless appearance and its sharp, clean angles. The tool marks would be absent because the process was fundamentally different from any stoneworking technique we know. The structure's incredible resistance to the strong ocean currents and its minimal erosion over millennia could also be explained by the same time-altering principles we discussed for Atlantean architecture. If the rock was stabilized at a quantum level, it would be incredibly resistant to the slow decay that defines entropy, just as we theorized for the buildings in Atlantis itself. These underwater anomalies scattered across the globe may not be the sunken cities we imagine from Hollywood. They might be something subtler and more profound, the geological scars of a lost technology. The Bimini Road could be the remnant of a coastal facility whose advanced concrete-like material has fossilized over the ages. The Yonaguni monument might be a sacred site carved directly into a cliff face when it was above water, its true nature obscured by both the sea and our own limited understanding of what is possible. These sites challenge us not because they provide easy answers, but because they stubbornly refuse to conform neatly to either purely natural or conventionally human explanations. They exist in a gray area, pointing toward a forgotten chapter in human history where the line between natural formation and engineered structure was perhaps not as clear as it is today. They are tantalizing clues suggesting that the story of our past is far deeper and more mysterious than our history books have ever dared to admit. While the search for physical evidence continues on the ocean floor, perhaps the most compelling and enduring clues about Atlantis have emerged not from divers or archaeologists, but from the depths of the human mind. No single figure has been more influential in weaving Atlantis into the fabric of modern alternative history than Edgar Cayce, the man known as the Sleeping Prophet. Born in 1877 in rural Kentucky, Cayce was a medical clear-cutter of extraordinary ability. He would enter a self-induced trance state and, while asleep, could diagnose illnesses and prescribe complex remedies for people hundreds of miles away with an accuracy that baffled doctors. But his psychic readings extended far beyond medicine, delving into past lives, world events, and most famously, the lost civilization of Atlantis. Over the course of his life, Cayce gave more than 14,000 readings, and of those, nearly 700 contained detailed information about Atlantis, its technology, and its ultimate fate, creating a psychic narrative that has captivated seekers for generations. Cayce's descriptions of Atlantis are astonishingly specific and align in remarkable ways with both Plato's account and our own speculative theories about advanced technology. He described a highly sophisticated society that harnessed a powerful energy source from the sun, captured and focused through huge, multifaceted crystals. These crystals, which he called the Tuaoi stone or the firestone, were housed in central power stations and provided energy for every aspect of Atlantean life, from transportation and communication to healing and spiritual development. According to Cayce, the Atlanteans used this crystal energy to power aircraft and submarines, and could even project thoughts and images across vast distances, much like a form of television or telepathy. This description resonates powerfully with our earlier exploration of a time crystal-based resonant network, a centralized power source that synchronized an entire civilization. Cayce's visions provided a tangible mechanism for the legendary power of Atlantis, one that moved beyond vague magic and into the realm of advanced physics, albeit described in a metaphysical language. The most dramatic part of Cayce's Atlantean narrative, and the one that has fueled expeditions for decades, was his prediction of the civilization's rediscovery. He stated that records of Atlantis's knowledge and history were preserved in 3 separate locations before the final cataclysm. One set of records, he claimed, was hidden in a hall of records beneath the Great Sphinx in Egypt, waiting to be unearthed. Another was placed in the Yucatan Peninsula, but the most significant repository, according to Cayce, lies near the island of Bimini, precisely in the region where the mysterious Bimini Road was later discovered. He specifically predicted that a portion of the temples would be uncovered in 1968 or 69, and indeed, the Bimini Road was found in 1968. For his followers, this was not a coincidence but a stunning validation of his psychic abilities, directly linking his visions to a physical site and igniting a renewed surge of interest in finding the lost continent. Cayce's influence extends far beyond this one prediction. He created a grand, cyclical history of human civilization in which Atlantis was not a one-off anomaly but a pivotal chapter. He described 3 distinct periods of Atlantean destruction, each corresponding to a major wave of human migration as refugees fled the sinking landmass. These migrants, he claimed, brought their advanced knowledge to Egypt, the Pyrenees, and the Americas, seeding the rise of later ancient civilizations. This framework provides a powerful explanation for the parallel myths of flood gods and advanced beings found in cultures worldwide, offering a unified theory that connects the pyramids of Egypt, the megaliths of South America, and the mystical traditions of the Maya. In Case's view, Atlantis was the mother culture, and its legacy is woven into the very DNA of human history. It is crucial, however, to approach Case's legacy with a balanced perspective. Skeptics rightly point out that many of his specific predictions, including the exact re-emergence of Atlantis in the 1960s, did not come to pass as described. While the Bimini Road was found on schedule, it has not yielded the clear, inscribed records he mentioned. His readings are also a product of their time, reflecting early 20th century spiritualist ideas and a fascination with the occult. Yet, to dismiss him entirely is to overlook his profound impact. Edgar Cayce did more than just give readings. He gave Atlantis a soul. He transformed it from a philosophical allegory or a geological mystery into a living, breathing chapter of our spiritual heritage. He provided a narrative of hope and rediscovery, suggesting that the wisdom of Atlantis was not lost forever but merely dormant, waiting for humanity to evolve to a point where we could understand it without repeating the same mistakes. His work has inspired countless authors, researchers, and filmmakers, shaping the modern image of Atlantis as a civilization of enlightened beings who mastered energy, time, and consciousness itself. Whether one views him as a genuine psychic or a powerful storyteller, Edgar Cayce ensured that the legend of Atlantis would continue to haunt and inspire us, challenging us to look for the echoes of a lost world not just in the ocean but within ourselves. While the theories of physicists and the visions of psychics offer one kind of insight, perhaps the most pervasive modern image of Atlantis comes not from academic journals, but from the bright screens of our cinemas and the colorful pages of comic books. Pop culture has become the primary lens through which most people today encounter the legend, and these fictional portrayals have powerfully shaped our collective imagination, often blending ancient myth with futuristic speculation to create something entirely new. The journey of Atlantis through movies, games, and literature reveals not just a fascination with a lost world, but a deep-seated cultural anxiety and optimism about technology itself. Consider Disney's 2001 animated film, Atlantis, The Lost Empire. This version presents a radical departure from the classical Greek-inspired society Plato described. Instead, we are introduced to a civilization that has survived by retreating into a massive, domed city, powered by a glowing, crystalline energy source known as the heart of Atlantis. This crystal is the lifeblood of the city, providing light, power, and even longevity to its people. The film's aesthetic is a brilliant fusion of Art Deco design and steampunk technology, featuring advanced submarines, flying fish-like vehicles, and weaponry that harnesses the crystal's energy. This portrayal directly echoes our speculative theories about a centralized power core, but it packages it in a way that is visually spectacular and immediately understandable. The heart of Atlantis is less a precise time crystal and more a general-purpose magical energy source, but its function as the indispensable, guarded secret of a technologically superior race aligns perfectly with the core themes of the legend. Disney's take made the idea of a high-tech Atlantis accessible to a generation, cementing the image of a society that was not just ancient but scientifically magnificent. The world of comic books, particularly Marvel and DC universes, has taken this technological premise and expanded it to cosmic proportions. In Marvel Comics, Atlantis is primarily known as the Kingdom of Nama the Submariner. While often depicted with a classical undersea aesthetic, Marvel's Atlantis possesses biotechnology and engineering that allows it to thrive at the bottom of the ocean. Their buildings are made of resilient, organic-looking materials that withstand immense pressure, and they utilize advanced genetics and energy manipulation. DC Comics offers an even more explicit link to advanced science with the story of Aquaman. Here, Atlantis is a sunken empire whose people have evolved to breathe underwater, but their true power lies in their mastery of a mysterious ancient energy, often linked to the clear or other elemental forces. They wield energy tridents, ride genetically engineered sea creatures, and possess technology that can create force fields and manipulate water on a massive scale. These comic book interpretations amplify the idea of Atlantean superiority, framing them not as a lost human culture, but as a separate, often more powerful, species whose technology is indistinguishable from sorcery. This reflects a modern narrative where ancient advanced cultures are seen as having access to fundamental forces of the universe that we have since forgotten. Video games have provided perhaps the most interactive exploration of this high-tech Atlantis. The best example is the Tomb Raider series, particularly the classic games where Lara Croft seeks the mythical Scion. The Atlantean ruins she explores are not simple stone temples. They are dangerous, mechanized complexes filled with laser traps, automated defenses, and puzzling machinery that still functions after millennia. This portrayal suggests a civilization whose architecture was not just grand, but intelligent and reactive, protected by a security system that has outlived its creators. It's a vision of technology that is both awe-inspiring and deadly, emphasizing the forbidden aspect of the knowledge. Other games, like the Assassin's Creed franchise, weave Atlantis into a broader sci-fi mythology involving a pre-human species, the Isu, whose advanced technology was interpreted as magic by early humans. In this narrative, the powerful artifacts like the Pieces of Eden are literally the tools of a civilization that mastered physics and genetics, whose downfall created the myths of gods and cataclysms. This interpretation cleverly bridges the gap between myth and science fiction, suggesting that all our ancient legends of power are fragmented memories of a real, hyper-advanced technological past. The influence of these portrayals on our perception of the real-world legend is profound. For many, the fictional image of glowing crystals and underwater cities is Atlantis. This can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it keeps the legend alive and exciting, inspiring curiosity and a willingness to entertain extraordinary possibilities. It encourages people to ask, what if it were true, and to look at archaeological mysteries with a more open mind. On the other hand, it can trivialize the historical and philosophical depth of Plato's original account, reducing it to a simple adventure trope or a backdrop for superhero battles. The danger is that the pop culture version becomes so dominant that it overshadows the more nuanced and potentially more plausible theories about a sophisticated Bronze Age civilization that was advanced for its time, rather than possessing literal laser guns and flying ships. Yet, the persistence of the high-tech theme across so many different media platforms is itself a powerful clue. It suggests that the idea of a lost, advanced civilization resonates with a fundamental human intuition. We look at the seeming rapidity of our own technological progress, from the Industrial Revolution to the digital age in just a few centuries, and we instinctively wonder if this has happened before. The stories we tell about Atlantis, whether in a Disney film or a blockbuster video game, are ultimately stories about ourselves. They reflect our own fears about the destructive potential of our technology and our hopes that we might use it to build a utopia. The fictional Atlanteans are often destroyed by their own hubris, a warning we seem compelled to repeat. In this way, pop culture doesn't just distort the legend of Atlantis. It continues its ancient purpose, using the sunken empire as a mirror to examine our own relationship with power, knowledge, and the responsibility that comes with bending the laws of nature to our will. But this brings us to a pivotal crossroads, a moment where we must pause our excitement over rediscovery and confront a deeply unsettling question. We are standing on the threshold of potentially unlocking the very principles that may have powered Atlantis, but are we truly prepared for the consequences? The story of Atlantis is not just a tale of technological wonder, it is one of history's most profound cautionary tales. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask if humanity, in its current state of development, possesses the wisdom and ethical maturity to wield a power that touches the fundamental fabric of reality. This is not a question about engineering, it is a question about our collective soul. We have been here before, standing at the brink of transformative and terrifying power. The development of nuclear energy in the 20th century provides a stark and sobering parallel. Initially hailed as a source of limitless, clean energy that would pave the way for a utopian future, the splitting of the atom almost immediately revealed its dual nature. The same science that promised to light our cities was used to create weapons capable of extinguishing all life on Earth in a flash of blinding light. The Manhattan Project was a testament to human ingenuity, a feat that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. Yet the first use of that power was not to build, but to destroy on an unimaginable scale. The resulting nuclear arms race created a permanent sword of Damocles hanging over humanity, a constant threat of annihilation that persists to this day. The pursuit of atomic knowledge gifted us with both the potential for abundance and the certainty of existential risk. Have we navigated that responsibility well? The mixed legacy of nuclear power with its radioactive waste, its potential for catastrophic accidents, and its enduring link to warfare suggests that our technological ambitions have consistently outpaced our ethical frameworks. Now we find ourselves in a similar ethical maelstrom with the rapid ascent of artificial intelligence. Like nuclear science in the 1940s, AI is exploding with potential, promising to revolutionize medicine, solve climate change, and unlock new frontiers of knowledge. Yet its dangers are equally profound. We are grappling with existential fears of a superintelligence that could escape our control, more immediate threats of mass job displacement, the erosion of privacy, and the weaponization of autonomous systems. The very architects of this technology are now some of its most vocal cautionaries, warning that we are creating a force we may not be able to contain. The pattern is hauntingly familiar. A rush toward a powerful new capability driven by competition and the allure of progress, with the ethical and safety considerations treated as an afterthought. If we are struggling to manage the societal impact of algorithms and machine learning, what hope do we have of responsibly handling a technology that operates on the laws of time and causality itself? Time crystal technology, in its ultimate form, would represent a leap far beyond nuclear fission or artificial intelligence. It wouldn't just be a new tool or a more powerful energy source. It would be a means of interacting with the operating system of the universe. The power to locally manipulate time carries risks that make nuclear bombs seem simple by comparison. A nuclear explosion unleashes a finite amount of energy within the normal flow of time. A malfunction in a time-altering system could, in theory, create a paradox, a rift in causality from which there is no return. Imagine an experiment gone wrong that creates a closed time-like curve, a loop where cause and effect break down. The results wouldn't just be an explosion, they could be a logical impossibility that unravels local reality. The very concept of after could cease to have meaning. This isn't science fiction scaremongering. It is a legitimate consideration raised by physicists when discussing the theoretical implications of manipulating spacetime. The Atlantean legend, with its tale of a civilization vanishing in a single day and night, could be a mythological encoding of exactly this kind of catastrophic failure. Beyond the apocalyptic scenarios, the societal implications of such a technology would be deeply divisive. Who would control it? We can already see the immense inequality created by the digital divide. A temporal divide would be infinitely worse. If the technology for life extension or perfect health became possible, would it be available to all, or only to a wealthy elite who could afford to purchase decades of extra life? This could cement a permanent, unbridgeable gulf between an immortal ruling class and a mortal underclass. The ability to perceive or slightly influence probable futures would create an unbearable advantage in finance, politics, and warfare. The temptation to use such power for selfish gain or dominance would be overwhelming, likely leading to a new form of tyranny more absolute than any in history. The story of Atlantis warns us that this power corrupts, that the human nature, when mixed with divine-level technology, tends toward arrogance and aggression. The ethical challenge is not just about preventing disaster, but about ensuring that such a profound capability uplifts all of humanity, rather than becoming the ultimate instrument of oppression. So, where does this leave us? The allure of this knowledge is undeniable. The potential to solve energy crises, reverse environmental damage, cure all disease, and perhaps even conquer death are dreams worth pursuing. To turn away from discovery feels like a betrayal of the human spirit of inquiry. Yet, the legend of Atlantis stands as an eternal monument to the price of hubris. Perhaps the answer is not to abandon the pursuit, but to fundamentally change how we pursue it. We must tie our technological progress directly to our ethical and spiritual evolution. This means establishing robust international oversight and ethical frameworks before the technology is fully realized, not as a desperate reaction afterward. It demands a global conversation about the kind of future we want to build, prioritizing wisdom over speed and cooperation over competition. The quest to understand time crystals should be accompanied by an equally intense quest to understand ourselves, our limitations, and our capacity for compassion. The lesson of Atlantis may not be that the technology is forbidden, but that it must be earned. We must prove through our actions today that we have grown up enough to be trusted with the keys to time itself. The sunken continent's greatest treasure may not be a crystal, but a warning we are only now learning to decipher. This journey into the heart of the Atlantis mystery inevitably leads us down a darker, more shadowy path, one lined with questions that challenge not just our understanding of history, but our trust in the very institutions that govern our present. If the evidence for such a civilization is so compelling, if the technological parallels are so striking, then why is Atlantis still relegated to the fringes of archaeology and dismissed by mainstream science? For a growing number of researchers and conspiracy theorists, the answer is not a lack of evidence, but an active, orchestrated campaign to suppress it. This is the suppression theory, a web of allegations suggesting that powerful groups from world governments to clandestine secret societies have already discovered the truth about Atlantis and are deliberately keeping it from the public to maintain their grip on power and control the trajectory of human progress. The alleged motivations for such a cover-up are as varied as they are disturbing. The most frequently cited reason is energy. Imagine the destabilizing effect on the global economy if a technology like a time crystal power source were suddenly made public. Our entire modern world runs on a foundation of fossil fuels, a multi-trillion-dollar industry that dictates global politics, funds nations, and empowers corporations. The introduction of a clean, limitless, and potentially decentralized energy source would dismantle this entire structure overnight. Oil barons, energy conglomerates, and the governments dependent on their revenue would see their influence evaporate. The very geopolitical landscape, shaped for over a century by the control of oil reserves, would be completely rewritten. From this perspective, suppressing evidence of Atlantean technology isn't just about greed. It's about preventing a societal and economic revolution so profound it would make the Industrial Revolution look like a minor adjustment. The current power structures have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, and a paradigm-shifting discovery of this magnitude represents an existential threat to their dominance. Another powerful motive revolves around national security and technological advantage. If one nation, say, the United States, through a clandestine program like the alleged reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology at Area 51, had successfully recovered and understood even a fraction of Atlantean science, it would grant them an unbeatable military edge. The principles behind temporal manipulation or gravity control could lead to weapons systems that render all conventional armies obsolete. Think of instant strike capabilities that defy the speed of light, impenetrable energy shields, or devices that could induce seismic events or control weather patterns. Possessing such technology would guarantee global supremacy for centuries. Revealing its existence, however, would trigger an arms race of unimaginable proportions as every other nation on Earth scrambled to catch up. Secrecy in this scenario is framed as a necessary evil to prevent global chaos and maintain a precarious balance of power, even if it means keeping humanity in the dark about its own history and potential. But what about the so-called evidence for these bold claims? Proponents of the suppression theory point to a number of curious incidents and enigmatic figures. One of the most famous is the case of Dr. Ray Brown, a naturopathic practitioner who, in 1972, claimed to have discovered a massive crystal pyramid while scuba diving near the Bahamas. He recounted entering the structure and finding a metallic rod holding a brilliantly glowing, multi-faceted gem above a sculpture of hands. He allegedly took the crystal and kept it secret for years, only occasionally showing it to researchers who reported strange phenomena in its presence, from healing effects to electronic disturbances. Skeptics dismiss the story as a pure fabrication, an elaborate hoax with no verifiable proof. Yet, for believers, Dr. Brown's tale is a classic example of a discovered artifact that was immediately suppressed, its existence denied, and its owner discouraged from going public, ensuring it never undergoes proper scientific analysis. Another pillar of the suppression narrative involves the mysterious findings of the late Dr. J. Manson Valentine, a zoologist and archaeologist who was deeply involved in the initial investigation of the Bimini Road. Valentine didn't believe the road was a natural formation. He argued it was part of a vast, geometrically aligned complex of walls and foundations. He and his colleagues reported finding what appeared to be layered stone blocks, pillars, and even tool marks. However, they often complained of a lack of funding and academic support, with their findings being dismissed by mainstream geologists without what they felt was a fair examination. To conspiracy theorists, this isn't scientific skepticism, it's active sabotage. The establishment, they argue, employs a simple but effective strategy. When anomalous evidence emerges, it is either ignored, explained away with overly simplistic natural theories, or the researchers themselves are marginalized and labeled as fringe eccentrics, effectively cutting off their access to credibility and resources. The secrecy extends beyond individual discoveries to entire explorations. The deep ocean remains one of the least mapped and most inaccessible frontiers on our planet. Yet, projects like the American military SOSUS, a network of underwater listening posts designed to track submarines, have been mapping the ocean floor in detail for decades. What have they found? The official line is nothing but geology. But theorists question this, asking why so much of the data from public-funded oceanic surveys remains classified. They point to anomalous sonar readings like the so-called Cuban underwater city, detected off the coast of Cuba in 2001, which showed symmetrical structures at depths of over 2,000 feet, depths that would have been above water during the last ice age. While geologists again propose natural explanations like fractured volcanic rock, the suppression theory sees a pattern. Any promising underwater site is quickly explained away, and further independent investigation is stifled, often under the guise of national security or marine preservation. Perhaps the most expansive version of this theory doesn't just involve modern governments, but ancient secret societies said to be the guardians of esoteric knowledge. Groups like the Freemasons or the Rosicrucians are often accused of possessing scrolls or artifacts passed down from Atlantis through the ages. According to this narrative, the survivors of the cataclysm, the enlightened priest-scientists, formed secret brotherhoods to preserve their knowledge until humanity was spiritually ready to receive it. Over millennia, these groups have allegedly influenced the course of history, guiding scientific and political revolutions from behind the scenes. the suppression in this view is not malicious but paternalistic. They are waiting for us to overcome our tendencies toward violence and greed before unveiling technologies that could otherwise lead to our self-destruction. This adds a philosophical layer to the conspiracy, suggesting that the truth is hidden not just for power, but for our own protection until we evolve beyond our current state of conflict. Evaluating these claims requires a careful balance. On one hand, it is healthy and rational to question authority and acknowledge that institutions can have vested interests that bias their actions. The historical precedent of governments covering up uncomfortable truths for national security, from the Manhattan Project to Cold War experiments, is well documented. It is not entirely paranoid to suspect that a discovery challenging the foundations of power might be met with resistance. Furthermore, the ocean is vast, and our exploration of it is in its infancy. It is entirely possible that genuine archaeological wonders await discovery, their significance initially misunderstood by a skeptical scientific establishment slow to accept radical new ideas. On the other hand, the suppression theory often relies on a lack of evidence as its primary evidence, an argument from silence that is difficult to prove or disprove. The scientific method, while imperfect and sometimes conservative, is built on verification and reproducibility. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and thus far, the evidence for a high-tech Atlantis remains circumstantial and open to interpretation. The dismissals by mainstream geologists are not necessarily a conspiracy. They are the application of Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation, usually a natural one, is most often the correct one. Attributing every dismissal to a malicious cover-up can become a circular argument that is immune to criticism. Ultimately, the suppression theory forces us to confront a deeply unsettling possibility about the nature of power and knowledge. It asks us to consider whether the narrative of human history we accept is a complete story or a carefully curated version designed to maintain control. Whether one views it as a legitimate suspicion or a paranoid fantasy, it highlights a crucial tension in the human quest for truth: the fear that some discoveries are considered too dangerous, too empowering, or too disruptive to be set free. The enduring power of the Atlantis legend may lie not just in the mystery of a sunken city, but in this lingering doubt that the greatest secrets of our past are not lost to time, but are being held just out of reach, waiting for a time when we are deemed worthy, or a time when we are brave enough to demand the truth. Yet for all the warnings and the shadow of a lost civilization, we cannot ignore the shimmering, hopeful vision on the horizon. What if we could learn from Atlantis's fatal mistake, not by abandoning the pursuit of such profound knowledge, but by approaching it with a newfound humility and a collective purpose? If humanity could master the principles of time crystal technology safely and ethically, the result wouldn't just be an incremental improvement in our quality of life. It would represent the most significant leap in human existence since the discovery of fire itself. We would be stepping into a future that seems lifted from the most optimistic pages of science fiction, a world where the fundamental struggles that have defined our history could finally be resolved. Let's allow ourselves to imagine that future, not as arrogant overlords of nature, but as wise stewards finally coming into our full inheritance. The most immediate and transformative impact would be on the global energy crisis, the root of so much geopolitical tension and environmental degradation. Our current energy grid is a monument to inefficiency, hemorrhaging vast amounts of power as waste heat during generation and transmission. A society powered by stabilized time crystals would operate on an entirely different principle. Picture a network of modest, decentralized power stations, each centered around a carefully maintained crystalline core. These wouldn't be massive, noisy factories belching smoke, but silent, clean facilities humming with a subtle, perpetual rhythm. Their primary function wouldn't be to generate energy through combustion or fission, but to act as perfect regulators and resonators. They could tap into the ambient energy that surrounds us constantly, the gentle warmth of the Earth's crust, the kinetic pulse of ocean currents, or even the faint quantum fluctuations of spacetime itself, and coax it into a coherent, usable flow with near-total efficiency. The concept of an energy bill, of resource wars over oil and gas, would become a relic of a primitive past. Every community, no matter how remote, would have access to limitless, clean power, lifting entire nations out of poverty and freeing up colossal financial and intellectual resources for other grand challenges. With the shackles of energy scarcity broken, we could tackle the next great frontier, human health and longevity. The medical applications would be nothing short of miraculous. We already theorized about Atlantean healing chambers. Imagine them realized as serene, technologically advanced sanctuaries. A patient suffering from a degenerative disease or a traumatic injury wouldn't be subjected to harsh chemicals or invasive surgeries as a first resort. Instead, they would rest in an environment bathed in a carefully calibrated resonant field, designed to interact with the body's own energetic blueprint. This field wouldn't magically cure anything. It would supercharge the body's innate ability to heal. Cellular repair mechanisms, which slow down with age and are overwhelmed by severe illness, would be gently guided and accelerated. Damaged DNA could be encouraged to repair itself. Cancerous cells could be prompted to return to a healthy state of apoptosis, and the entire system could be purged of toxins and metabolic debris. The goal wouldn't be reckless immortality, but the extension of our natural health span, potentially allowing people to live vibrant, active lives for 150 years or more, free from the slow decay that currently defines old age. This mastery over biological processes would extend to our environment, offering a powerful solution to resource scarcity and climate change. Agriculture would be revolutionized. Vast vertical farms could be established in the hearts of cities, their internal climates perfectly stabilized by temporal fields to create ideal growing conditions for any crop, anywhere in the world at any time of year. Plants could be encouraged to grow faster and more nutritiously, not through genetic modification, but by optimizing their metabolic rhythms. Water, the source of life, would be purified and restructured effortlessly, turning deserts into fertile plains. Perhaps most importantly, we could develop technologies to actively repair the damage we've already done to our planet. Imagine large-scale resonant arrays deployed in the atmosphere or oceans, designed to harmonize and stabilize climatic patterns, gently reversing the trends of global warming and healing the acidification of the seas. We would transition from being a force of ecological disruption to becoming master gardeners of Earth, restoring the planet to a state of balance and abundance for all species. The most profound shift, however, might be in the realm of human potential and connection. With material needs met and lifespans extended, the frantic struggle for survival that has consumed so much of human endeavor would fade away. Education would transform from a race to acquire job skills into a lifelong journey of intellectual and creative exploration. An individual could master multiple disciplines, becoming a physicist, a composer, and a philosopher within a single extended lifetime. This cross-pollination of knowledge would undoubtedly lead to bursts of innovation and artistic expression we can barely conceive of today. Furthermore, communication could evolve beyond language barriers. If we developed even a fraction of the resonant network we imagined for Atlantis, it could pave the way for technologies that facilitate deeper, more intuitive understanding between people, fostering a global consciousness rooted in empathy rather than division. The very nature of work, society, and what it means to live a meaningful life would be redefined, opening a chapter of human history dedicated not to accumulation, but to creation, understanding, and spiritual growth. This is the true promise of the Atlantean Age, not the power to dominate, but the wisdom to flourish in harmony with each other and the universe itself. So where does this leave the modern explorer? If we accept the possibility that Atlantis was real, and that its technology was as advanced as we've theorized, then the search cannot be confined to old maps and philosophical texts. It must become a multidisciplinary hunt, leveraging the most sophisticated tools of the 21st century. The quest has moved from the library to the laboratory, from the diver's mask to the satellite's eye. Today's search for Atlantis is a fascinating blend of cutting-edge science and daring exploration, each approach offering a unique way to peel back the layers of time and ocean that hide this ultimate secret. One of the most powerful new tools in this quest is satellite archaeology. By using advanced imaging from space, researchers can scan vast areas of the ocean surface for subtle clues hidden beneath. This doesn't mean looking for the outline of a city on the seafloor. That's far too deep for optical satellites. Instead, scientists use radar and other sensors to detect anomalies in the ocean's surface topography. A large, submerged structure on the seabed can create a tiny, measurable disturbance in the water above it, a slight dip or rise in the sea level caused by gravitational variations. This technique, known as satellite altimetry, has been used to map the ocean floor with surprising accuracy, revealing underwater mountains and trenches. For the Atlantean hunter, the goal is to find something that doesn't fit the natural geology, a perfect geometric shape, a grid-like pattern, or a formation that resembles the concentric circles Plato described, all lying on a submerged plateau that was above water during the last ice age. These digital surveys allow us to scan thousands of square miles without ever leaving dry land, pinpointing promising targets for expensive and risky underwater missions. When a potential site is identified, the real deep-sea detective work begins. This is the realm of autonomous underwater vehicles, or a UVS, and remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. These robotic explorers are the true pioneers of the abyss, capable of diving to depths that would crush a human diver, equipped with high-definition cameras, sonar scanners, and sophisticated sampling tools. They can methodically map a site, creating detailed three-dimensional models of the seafloor. If explorers were to find a structure like the hypothetical Atlantean power core, they wouldn't necessarily be looking for a shiny, intact crystal. After 12,000 years under the sea, any technology would be heavily degraded, likely encrusted with minerals and coral. The key would be to identify anomalous materials. Using spectrometers, these robots could analyze the chemical composition of a formation from a distance. They might detect a strange concentration of metals or alloys not found in nature, or a crystalline structure with unique energetic properties. The search is not for a pristine city, but for its ghost, the chemical and geometric fingerprint of intelligent design where none should exist. But perhaps the most crucial shift in the search is knowing what to look for. If we're searching for evidence of a time crystal-based civilization, our criteria change dramatically. We shouldn't just be looking for pyramids or paved roads. We should be searching for evidence of advanced material science and energy manipulation. This means that archaeological digs on land, in regions where Atlantean refugees might have fled, become just as important as ocean exploration. Imagine an excavation in coastal Spain or Morocco, areas Plato mentioned as being within the Atlantean sphere of influence. What would we hope to find? Not a gold statue, but a piece of anomalous slag metal, an alloy that doesn't match any known ancient metallurgy, or a ceramic shard that shows evidence of having been fired at temperatures impossibly high for a Bronze Age kiln. These seemingly insignificant artifacts could be the real treasure, physical proof of a lost industrial knowledge. Furthermore, the search should extend to geological evidence of a catastrophic event that matches Plato's timeline. Core samples taken from the seabed in the Atlantic can reveal layers of sediment deposited by a massive tsunami around 12,000 years ago. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica can show evidence of a sudden, global climatic shift corresponding to that period. The Younger Dryas event, a mysterious 1200-year period of abrupt cooling that began roughly 12,800 years ago, is a prime candidate. Many scientists believe it was caused by a comet impact or airburst. Could this event be the scientific kernel of the Atlantis story? Finding evidence of a continent-wide cataclysm in the Atlantic basin would provide a plausible physical mechanism for the island's destruction, moving the legend from myth into the realm of historical catastrophe. Ultimately, the modern search for Atlantis is a puzzle with pieces scattered across many different fields. It requires the patience of an archaeologist, the technical skill of an oceanographer, the broad vision of a satellite analyst, and the open-mindedness of a theoretical physicist. The next great discovery might not be a headline-grabbing golden statue. It might be a strange reading from a robot submarine sensor, a peculiar geochemical signature in a deep-sea core sample, or a reinterpretation of an ancient myth in light of a new physics breakthrough. The search continues not as a wild fantasy, but as a serious, if unconventional, scientific inquiry. It is driven by the enduring human belief that our past may be far more extraordinary than we've been taught, and that the deepest secrets of our history are still waiting, patient and silent, at the bottom of the sea. From the ancient words of Plato to the humming quantum laboratories of today, our journey has spanned millennia, weaving together threads of myth, legend, and cutting-edge science. We began with a simple, captivating story of a magnificent island empire that fell beneath the waves, and we've explored the astonishing possibility that this tale is not mere fantasy, but a faded memory of a reality beyond our wildest imaginations. We've considered a civilization that may have unlocked the secrets of matter and time, harnessing the principles of perpetual motion crystals to power a golden age of impossible architecture, limitless energy, and profound wisdom. We've seen how this incredible technology could have been their undoing, a victim of the very hubris that Plato warned us about, leading to a cataclysm that was as much a fracture in reality as it was a physical flood. And we've looked at the eerie parallels in modern physics, where time crystals have shifted from science fiction to laboratory fact, suggesting that the Atlanteans may have been pioneers on a path we are only just beginning to walk. This exploration reveals a narrative far richer than a simple sunken city. It points to a lost technological paradigm, a different way of interacting with the fundamental forces of the universe. The story of Atlantis, when viewed through this lens, becomes a profound metaphor for the eternal human dance with power. It challenges the linear progression of history we so often take for granted, suggesting that advanced knowledge can be discovered, lost, and rediscovered in great cycles. The legend endures not because we hope to find treasure, but because it speaks to a deep intuition that we have done this before, that we have touched greatness and experienced the devastating price that can come with it. The ruins we search for on the ocean floor may be less important than the ruins we carry within our own collective memory, a cautionary blueprint etched into our myths. This brings us to a final haunting question, one that resonates far beyond the fate of a single lost continent. As we stand at our own technological crossroads, grappling with the power of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and now the nascent control over time itself, we must ask, are we, humanity, any wiser than the legendary kings of Atlantis? Do we possess the maturity to wield universe-altering power without succumbing to the same arrogance that supposedly sealed their fate? The lesson of Atlantis may not be that such knowledge is forbidden, but that it demands a proportional growth in wisdom, ethics, and collective responsibility. The city is lost, but the choice remains. Will we use our newfound understanding to build a world of harmony and abundance, or will we, like the Atlanteans of lore, allow our technological ambition to outpace our humanity, risking a downfall of our own making? The mystery of Atlantis is far from solved. It lives on in every sonar anomaly, every reinterpreted myth, and every quantum breakthrough. What do you think? Could the story be a genuine echo of a prehistoric world, or is it a powerful allegory that becomes more relevant with each scientific leap we make? I'm incredibly curious to hear your thoughts and your own theories. Share your ideas in the comments below. Let's continue this fascinating conversation.